Do you have the gift of gab and like talking about interesting topics? Are you often called opinionated by your friends and family? Then come to Anchor where you can be all of the above and get paid for it. Along with being one of the easiest systems to create contact with, Anchor supplies everything you need and can be used from your smartphone or computer. They even distribute your content for you so that you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and you are listening to, today is April 5th, and you are listening to more on the Manosphere. So, the Manosphere is actually a carryover from a series I started in March, called 31 Days of Global Feminism. And it morphed into its own series because I started to realize that I had so much information that I was going to have to go over, that I was like, I'm just going to have to put this into a separate series of its own. So you could say, if you were talking about series TV, the original series was 31 Days of Global Feminism, and the spinoff is the Manosphere. So the Manosphere wound up birthing a subtopic. So the topic is the Manosphere, but now I have another subtopic, and that's called the Jezebel spirit. So, I'm going into this, and the funny thing is, this would be part 3 of the Jezebel spirit, and it's to challenge, and this is not to support the notion of Jezebel. And if you want to know about Jezebel and who the Jezebel spirit is based on in church teachings, Jezebel was a queen. She was the wife of Ahab, who was actually a Israelite, and she was, they were unequally yoked. She was a pagan worshiper, idol worshiper. So if you want to read more about her, she's contained in the Old Testament. She's also mentioned again in the book of Revelation, where a woman who is a false prophet, that calls herself a prophet, is mentioned, and I guess was leading the people into immorality. And that can be found in the book of Revelations. I'll look both of those up if I can, if I have time. Well, I have time. I mean, this is my own broadcast, but I'll find those biblical references. Now, so modern day Jezebel spirit teachings come out of, that's where the name Jezebel comes from. But actual Jezebel spirit teachings have their roots on the plantation. They're actually grounded and rooted in, the Jezebel spirit in and of itself is not a biblical term. Because if you notice when Jesus was casting out spirits, they would say something like Legion, I think another one, but you don't hear anybody hollering Jezebel. And usually when someone calls a woman a Jezebel, what they're referring to is her refusal to bow to male authority. And the funny thing to me is I've run into more men that have a problem with female authority, right? And you may say that women are not supposed to be in authority. The Bible would not agree with you because there are prophetesses in the Bible. There's Deborah, or Deborah, depending on how you want to pronounce her name. She was a prophetess that was found in the Old Testament. Moses' sister Miriam was a prophetess. She was a prophetess, and I believe she was a psalmist as well. I'm trying to think if there's another one in the Old Testament. If you look, there's the prophetess Anna, who was a widow from her youth. So if you go by modern day teachings, she would be said to be uncovered. So I think it's interesting that people will take the scriptures and take the part about a woman preaching or teaching with her head uncovered to mean that she needs to be married before preaching or teaching. But if you look at that scripture closely, they're talking about a woman having a piece of cloth on her head, or having her head covered literally by a piece of cloth, and not a man. So you see how you can take the scriptures and twist them to suit whatever agenda you are trying to serve. Now, there are some things that are kind of non-negotiables, like the whole LGBTQ being an abomination, that stuff like that. There's nothing I can really do about that. You know what I'm saying? But right now, we got straight folks who ain't even acting right. So, and it's funny to me how when I used to sit in church and I would hear all of the hate speech about the LGBTQ community, and I remember my godmother, when she first got saved, asking, she said, why is it that so many pastors can go hard after that community? And I said, well, the Bible does say that it is an abomination. I mean, I can't argue with that. You can't really argue with the written word of God. However, I have to talk about the motives when you are talking about that kind of thing. So I said, number one, it's probably the one sin that they haven't committed. Because I have noticed over the years with certain pastors, if there's something that they have a struggle with or whatever, they either go in one or two streams. They either tiptoe around it and barely, want to acknowledge that it's a sin, because if they have to acknowledge that it's a sin, then they have to acknowledge that they're sinning. Then there's the ones who they in it and they're locked in, and they really don't want to be locked in. So because they locked in, they'll fight it, but it's almost like because they struggling, everybody else got to struggle with them. So they wind up making up all kind of rules to make everybody else suffer, because instead of just going and getting delivered, so that they're not sharing their bondage, if that makes any sense at all. So some people will make rules for you that cover something you're not even struggling with, based on their own struggle. And if you think I'm playing, think about some of the dress codes, unspoken dress codes that you see. And I ain't saying come to church looking like you going to the club. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a hindrance for some people too, because many people were raised that when you come to the house of the Lord, you come presenting yourself as holy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can remember seeing one of my people that I'm subscribed to criticizing, once again, Erica Campbell being criticized for the photograph of her with the white dress on. And I personally, for me, it's an issue of, are we criticizing the dress? Are we criticizing the fact that a sister got dimensions? Okay. And it's funny, the men's reaction on that, because you have a lot of men, ain't nothing wrong with that dress. Well, because you like looking at her in the dress. So, of course, you're not going to have no problems. I did a series called Hoifying, which is still very much alive and well. I'm not going to stop it. It is ongoing, even though I haven't posted anything about So Hoifying is a term. It's a form of slut shaming. And it really is a form of slut shaming. It's labeling a woman a hoe for things that don't make her a hoe. Stuff like going to too many concerts. I got criticized for going to too many concerts when I was going and posting about and blogging about going to concerts. And guess what? I got some more concerts planned this year. I was going back to Maslin or Canton one to I think it might have been Canton. So if you know anything about high school football, you know that Maslin Tigers and Canton McKinley Bulldogs have a rivalry. And the rivalry is, if you're a betting person, and yeah, I know Christianity doesn't support gambling, but for those that have any memory of being a gambler, it's rumored that the high school rivalry goes all the way up to Vegas in the polls as far as people betting on who's going to win that game. So, that's the true blue. That's for the true blue football fans, okay? So the true blue football fans know that Maslin Tigers and, Maslin, Ohio is known for football, and Canton McKinley is too, but Maslin only having one main high school, or Canton, I think, has McKinley, Glen Oak, like they have several. They're a little bit bigger city. And so, there's this rivalry every year. So the past few years, because I've had, transportation and had the ability to make it up there, when I was like 5 years without a car, so when I finally was able to get a car again and had some money, I decided to go to the last few games. And so I was just like, I'm gonna go just for shits and giggles. I'm going. I wanna go and see it. Want to go out of town and go to the game. And so and I may go again this year. Just because I felt like going for the heck of it. I'm like, I'm going. So I went. And so I went into this store, and this girl, I said I was going, and so she said, well, we all know what goes on at some of them games. And I'm like, it's a high school football game, and I am in my 50s. Really? You really gonna go there? And so she was like, yeah, was it, and she basically called herself trying to call me a groupie. Now, keep in mind that this young lady was also younger than me. And so I'm like, going to games doesn't make you a groupie. So when it comes to women's behavior, I have noticed throughout the years, you have one or two camps. You either have the ones that have too much freedom and probably their parents should have monitored them, and they probably wouldn't have got into or been exposed to some of the stuff they got exposed to if their parents would have put some limits and some boundaries on them. Okay? And yeah, I do think, kids benefit when we set boundaries and we set structure. Then there's the other camp, and I think that this camp is almost a little bit more damaging than too much freedom, and that's no freedom at all, to the point where you are controlled. And I have seen young ladies like that. They're not allowed, they can barely blink at a guy, and they can't go to no parties, no R-rated movies, this, that, and the other. And you can say, well, they're just trying to love on their children. Let me tell you a little bit about parenting now that I have survived two, and I'm glad I got a chance to raise a male and a female, because I got to see for myself if the differences that the differences other than genitalia that society places on males and females, are they rooted in reality? And I purposely went out of my way with both my children not to try to impose any gender roles on them. They were pretty much my lifelong experiment while they were younger. And so that was my experiment. If I don't impose any gender roles on them, how will they grow up? And so, first of all, I found it harder to do. So the experiment was also on me, because I found it harder to do than what I thought I would have a hard time doing. Because even though I was not raised in an environment where there was girls ain't got no business going, and wasn't no real strict entrenched gender roles in the way that I was raised. In fact, I'm finding out that my environment was a little bit even though there's levels of toxicity there, trust me. But I found out, with some of the stuff, that I went through, even though I was not raised with a lot of deeply entrenched gender roles in my upbringing, I found it very hard not to impose, because you are a whole lot more socialized to believe in gender roles than what you think. So it became an exercise in deep examination. My son was playing with my high heels one time, and I took them away from him. And boys don't do that. Now, I didn't want him to think it was normal to do that. And then I had to get me. Why is it not normal for him to do that? He doesn't know. What are you fearful of? And I found out through my own experience that, especially with boys, most of the stuff that's placed on boys is fear that somehow they'll turn out gay. Right? How many, I'm talking about not just from myself, because I didn't really kind of have that fear. As a born-again Christian, I didn't really I haven't been in church all my life. I'm from a pretty liberal family, so I wasn't kind of raised to hate homosexuals. But I also found, people's opinions outside. My son was playing with this girl's daughter, and she said, "You let your son play with baby dolls?" And I never thought about it. I'm like, well, when they play with G.I. Joes, they're playing with dolls. Like, I forgot that there are still people in the world that fear that if a little boy plays with dolls, that's somehow going to mess with his sexual identity. My son is very much straight. So those black men who keep wanting to get online and keep wanting to hold on to that old antiquated notion that a single parent household is producing homosexuals, there are more homosexuals out there with an intact family. And by intact, I mean they're being raised by a mother and a father, and there's more men coming out the closet that have a father in their home than there are boys being gay that have single mothers. So the people who is it hoteps or whatever, so these men, period, because you have a lot of white men who do that too. And yes, this is in keeping with Jezebel, because one of the charges that has been made against a lot of black women is we teach our daughters to get along without a man. No, who teaches our daughters to get along without a man is absent fathers. Men who decide that they don't want to stick around and raise their children. And I'm finding it, and like I said, ever since the Will and Jada thing, I'm finding it very interesting how many men think that it is a woman's responsibility to break up fights, like we have to be their moms. we got to break up their fights, if we don't step in and play peacemaker, that we're somehow less than a woman. And, well, we enjoy being fought over. I don't think it's that we enjoy being fought over. In many cases, everybody is not the woman from the 5 Heartbeats who had the boyfriend that went out and purposely flirted and, just to make her boyfriend prove his love every night. Okay? It's not that they enjoy being fought over, they enjoy being defended. And there is a big difference. You go through this world and be female and be of color and deal with the things that come with intersectionality. I think it's interesting that when it comes to a man standing up to another man and defending his wife, which is what this was supposed to be all about, until we hear different or uncover any other different stuff, that's what this was supposed to be about. It's still registering to me that it was even a real incident because my mind was saying, okay, surely this is staged, right? The Academy, the award shows are always doing something. It didn't register to me that it was real till the second time he cussed at Chris Rock. So, I find it interesting that the same men who think that it is not okay for a man to stand up to another man and defend his wife, and I done heard Jada be called all kind of B words. So you comics need to have your butt whooped. Okay? You would think that some of these men never had a mama, never had sisters, never had no positive black females in their life, that, every single one of them calling her the B word. I'm like, last time I looked, she was his wife. But okay, I'm going to let you have that for a minute. Because by the time I get done, you will feel a little bit of conviction about all that name calling. So, they don't see nothing wrong. They see there's something wrong with a man defending his wife. And no, I don't think it always takes violence to have your wife's back. But these same men believe it's okay to crush a woman's heart and damage a woman to, quote, protect their woman's heart. Girl, I have ran into some crazy teachings here lately. So I kept seeing this reoccurring thing on Facebook for a minute, telling men that if to prove their loyalty to their woman by breaking other women's hearts. And I'm like, why not prove your loyalty by not sleeping with someone else outside your relationship in the first place? How come respect your relationship never seems to mean don't share your penis with other women? So it's perfectly okay to hurt a woman to prove your loyalty to your woman. But standing up to a man standing up to a man to defend your woman, somehow there's a problem there. Can you see where I'm going with that? Because I personally, if you're going to protect my feelings, if you're going to have my back as a man, if you're going to stand by me as a man, I would just as soon you protect me. If you're going to have to protect me physically, I would rather you have to protect me physically from another man, because they're the bigger danger, number one. Number two, ain't but so much cruelty I'm gonna watch you practice on another woman and not wonder if you are capable of visiting that same cruelty onto me. I hear the holy hush, and I thank you for your amens. Ain't but so much cruelty that I'm going to be okay with watching you do to another woman without wondering if you're capable of that type of cruelty toward me. So now, let's say there's a situation where I'm engaged or married, or in a committed relationship that's leading to marriage, and another woman is trying to, they can only do what you allow. Okay? Unless she is physically threatening my man or doing something crazy to him. And men have upper body strength. This is where the gender trope gets in for me, because I do believe that guys have upper body strength. I don't believe that you have to destroy a woman to protect your relationship. And I remember going through some unbelievably cruel stuff at a church that I belonged to, and the Holy Spirit said, don't let him get away with saying that. Because he's not protecting his relationship. You're not even a threat to his relationship. You don't date married men. And I remember telling a group of women one time, and they were so mad. And I said, listen, I could be attracted to your man and still say no, because it's not in keeping with the goals that I have for my love life. Okay? So I come from a background where we were taught to be very goal-oriented. And so anything that steps in and encroaches on those goals, and to me, I attribute that to growing up black. Because I was the kind of black, I was the type of black that we had goals, because we knew we had to deal, number one, we knew we were up against racism. So racism is the number one thing that could mess with your goals. So trying to get to those goals and overcome racism, if you're a girl, sexism, those outside forces that are meant to hinder you, and then dealing with other black folk. Unfortunately, you have some people that you have some people that have the hang up that leadership always has to be white and male. I ain't one of them folks. Okay, I'm not. And if we can't get white and male, we'll do male and any other color, but it's got to have a penis. Because God forbid you should have a vagina and try to seek any type of leadership position. Or God forbid you should have a vagina and demonstrate any type of leadership potential. You still have people, even now in the year 2022, you still have people that are threatened by any woman that demonstrates that she's just as capable as any man of holding down that position. And let's face it, women bring a lot, it's funny because we know your place. Your place is over top of them kids. Your place is not in the boardroom. Your place is not in the White House, even though we now have our first woman vice president after, about 3-4 tries between, eventually we'll get the White House too, ladies. Okay? In the head position. So I celebrated Miss Harris. She was one of my first candidates when I talked about 21 days of black feminism. And so I've been doing both of those for a while. And, I was doing it informally on my Facebook page, and then I decided to start doing it. I'm like, why do you keep doing it on your private Facebook page when you could be doing it from your blogs? So I started doing it from my blogs and centering it that way. And it's been good. Been really, really good. Picked up followers and everything like that. So we getting there. But boy, is it a fight. I have never seen a justice be fought as hard as I haven't, because we've never been privy to all of that. We're in the information age, and we're starting to see more. And it's like I'm hearing, because I haven't watched the hearings with Miss Jackson, because I'm just like, she got it right. And child, from what I'm hearing, they fighting tooth and nail. They are fighting tooth and nail. Those that have a problem with her being there are putting her through it. And I'm like, Lord, I would never have thought in 2022 that we would still be fighting some of the hurdles. But like I said, 2020 was sort of a year of clarity. It was the fat lady. It was the fat mirror in your favorite boutique that basically showed you that extra 5, 10, 15 pounds that you thought you lost and where it went. It showed you the good, bad, and the ugly. So it was clarifying, and it was clarifying. We always think of clarity as the heavens opening up and us being poured out a blessing, that there is no room. Well, the blessing comes, but the blessing, if you got some stuff that you need to deal with, clarity will also show you that. And it showed us, okay? Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we're seeing. So I got a chance to hear his name, Corey Holcomb, and his take on the Will Smith thing. And as I predicted, Jada is now being Jezebel. So, she's being Jezebel. She's being blamed for the entire thing. Never mind, it really had nothing to do with her. It had everything, it had nothing to do, her husband's choice of how to deal with a man that he felt like was making fun of his wife really has nothing to do with her. Well, she was kind of laughing the same time everybody else was laughing, because I don't think anybody thought that it was real until he cursed the second time. So anyway, I have some more information here on the whole Jezebel thing. Let me see here. So this one is courtesy of Wikipedia. So Jezebel. The Jezebel is a stereotype of a sexually voracious, promiscuous black woman. This was the counter-image of the demure Victorian lady in every way. The idea stemmed from Europeans' first encounter with semi-nude women in tropical Africa. The African practice of polygamy was attributed to uncontrolled lust, and tribal dances were construed as pagan orgies, in contrast to European Christian chastity. The supposed indiscriminate sexual appetite of black women slaves justified their enslavers' efforts to breed them with other slaves. It also justified rape by white men, even as a legal defense. Black women could not be rape victims because they always desired sex. This is in quotes. The abolitionist James Redpath wrote that slave women were gratified by the criminal advances of Saxons, meaning Anglo-Saxons. During and after Reconstruction, black women had little recourse when raped by white men, and many black women were reluctant to report their sexual victimization by black men, for fear that the black men would be lynched. So here we are suffering harm to protect our harmers. The Jezebel stereotype contrasts with the mammy, which I'm going to do a thing on mammy as well. Because they're at two complete opposite ends of the spectrum. The Jezebel stereotype contrasts with the mammy, providing two broad categories for pigeonholing by whites. Now, if you want to find this is under stereotypes of African Americans in Wikipedia. Let me see here. There was another one representing black culture. No. Stereotypes of black American. Stereotypes of black American women related to sexuality and motherhood. Okay, I think I already dealt with that one. There was another, okay. Okay. So this was an analysis that was done in 2021. Let me go ahead and open this link. So the title is Jezebel is one of 3 common racial slurs used against all black women and girls. The author is Yvonne McLean. This was published February 12, 2021, so it's just last year. And so she says, another black woman has been called Jezebel, a racial stereotype and slur that historically and persistently has been used to obfuscate the truth, promote and justify racial inequality and sexual violence against black women. According to Baptist Global News, this is interesting. Baptist News Global, 2 pastors called Vice President Kamala Harris Jezebel. The Jezebel stereotype is one of 3 pernicious racist and sexist stereotypes that have been used to rationalize and justify slavery and spur racist and sexist perceptions of black women. The 3 are Mammy, Sapphire, and Jezebel. So Gloria Layton Billings and Carolyn M. West, as well as many others, have written that these stereotypes originated in American slavery and continue. So the 3 stereotypes. Mammy is a slavery construct of black women that distorts the notion of caregiver. Layton Billings wrote, Mammy is generally characterized as grossly overweight, jolly, unattractive, dark complected, and asexual. It's funny, and it's funny how many people, because I used to think about that too, living only to serve the master, mistress, and their children. She is even neglectful of her own children and family while simultaneously over-solicitous toward whites. The mammy image is the old Aunt Jemima, the black woman wearing the kerchief on her head and wearing an apron, perpetually smiling on a pancake box. West says there's little historical evidence to support the existence of a subordinate, nurturing, self-sacrificing mammy figure. Enslaved women were often beaten, overworked, and raped. In response, they ran away and helped others escape, fought back when punished, and in some cases poisoned slave owners. I always wondered about that. Like, didn't anybody think and they've suffered at some point? According to West, the mammy stereotype was a lie. A jolly, smiling, fiercely loyal mammy was created so that we would believe slavery was a humane institution. Deborah Gray states that even the name mammy is steeped in material sentiment. Mammy is steeped in imagery. Mammy is steeped in imagery of surrogate mistress and mother. Hattie McDaniel played a fictional mammy in Gone with the Wind. So Sapphire. Sapphire is a construct that labels black women as stubborn, bitchy, bossy, and hateful. She lacks the requisite femininity to make her attractive to any man. Layson Billings writes, the Sapphire construct suggests that black women are the reason for the enmity between black men and women. Sound familiar? If you've been listening to any of the criticisms of Jada Pinkett Smith, you're going to hear this. So the Sapphire name traces its origins to the 50s television character on Amos and Andy. I got to see a few Amos and Andys, and that's where Sapphire kind of comes from. This will be, according to West, during slavery, the standard for femininity for white women, passivity, frailty, and domesticity, did not apply to black women. Black women, were characterized as strong, masculinized workhorses who labored with men in the fields, or as aggressive women who drove their children and partners away with their overbearing natures. The reality is that slaveholders sold black women's children and husbands away, which caused unmanageable grief and understandable anger. According to David Pilgrim, the Sapphire name is a slur, insult, and label designed to silence dissent and critique. And I agree with that. It's a way of punishing you for standing up for yourself. Blair Kelly, associate professor of history at North Carolina State University, associates the angry black woman trope to minstrel shows of the 19th century, where white men painted their faces black and mocked African Americans. Former President Donald Trump referred to then Senator Kamala Harris as angry, nasty, and a mad woman. He said she was probably nastier than even Pocahontas to Joe Biden. Wow. During the Democratic debates, referring to Senator I really don't want Donald Trump to get back in office. I really don't. Don't vote for him. Black people, be nice to each other. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, a white woman. So, Tamara Winfrey Harris, a black woman and author of The Sisters Are All Right, Changing the Broken Narrative of Black Women in America, has stated that the tactic of depicting black women as angry and mad black women describes the use of this language. This practice dates back to slavery, she notes. It is a bully tactic to intimidate black women who enter the mainstream space and to try to force them to shrink themselves and not to get that blowback or to stay silent, as I just said, when black women have every right to speak out, or to get black women to swallow their anger, even when black women have good cause to be angry. So here we go to Jezebel. Jezebel is a slave construct and stereotype that paints black women as evil and immoral. The Jezebel stereotype is synonymous with promiscuity, having an insatiable sexual appetite, someone who uses sex to manipulate men. Layson Billings writes, she is a conniving temptress who cannot be trusted. Accusing black women of these traits and calling them Jezebel also attempts to connect black women to the infamous treacherous queen in the Bible called Jezebel, who is accused of having turned the heart of her husband Ahab away from the worship of the one true God and away from righteous living. Reproduction and having a constant supply of slaves was essential to the institution of slavery. Pilgrim states that enslaved young girls were encouraged to have sex as part of their socializations as future breeders. When young black girls became pregnant during slavery, this was seen as evidence of their insatiable appetites and their Jezebel nature. Deborah Gray White provided detailed accounts of slave women and the culture of slavery that says the Jezebel stereotypes were meant to characterize black women. She writes, in every way Jezebel was the counter image of the mid-century ideal of the Victorian lady. She did not lead men and women to God. She did not lead men and children to God. Piety was foreign to her. According to West, during slavery, black women were stripped naked, examined to determine their reproductive capacity, placed on auction blocks, and sold. She states that enslaved black women were coerced, bribed, induced, seduced, ordered, and of course violently forced to have sexual relations with slaveholders, their sons, male relatives, and their overseers. The Jezebel stereotype, which branded black women as sexually promiscuous and immoral, was used to rationalize these sexual atrocities. So if you want to read more, because there's this article is long, but this is actually black. This is BaptistNews.com is the site that it's on, and the author is Yvonne McLean. So you can look this up. So you can look this up under that, and you can just go to the site and type in Jezebel, and type in Jezebel, and it should come up. So as I said, number one, not because I have this great prophetic leaning, the Holy Spirit will make you prophetic, but also because people are predictable, especially male people. Okay, so, and especially, and as a black woman, I have to say, some of our men are pretty predictable too, especially if they have a misogynoir bent toward their personality. And so I heard that, I think was a Corey Holcomb, have give his take, and I can't tell you how many bitches I had to hear Jada Pinkett Smith be called. Now someone's showing, running clips through my YouTube feed, and they're showing clips of her and Chris actually getting along during the filming of Madagascar 3. And I'm like, I forgot they did that together. And I was like, I looked it up, and that was done during 2012. So it was about 10 years ago. You know yourself, a lot can change in 10 years. In 10 years, you can go from being best buds to better buds. You can go from best buds to mortal enemies in 10 years. I've seen it and I've experienced it. Because people change, life happens. And so the reason I'm going, and this may go into a part 4 because I'm, rounding this up. I'm almost getting to an hour. I got about 12 minutes. So, the reason why I am giving so much information about not just the biblical Jezebel, but also the biblical Jezebel where she's mentioned, but I'm also giving information about, the historical use of the word Jezebel spirit in reference to black women is because you have to realize if you going along with racial injustice does not help it go away. Assimilating has never done us a bit of good as people. It doesn't help us. Trying to be closer in proximity to whiteness doesn't help us. What helps us is when we stand up for ourselves and we fight back collectively. Challenging the status quo has always been the tool that has helped us to make positive change. Always been the tool that has helped us make positive change. So we have never got anything done by cooperating with the status quo. Continuing to, the answer is not straightening your hair. The answer is not becoming more white. The answer is not learning from black men's preferences. If you listen to the stats, the overwhelming majority of black men are marrying black women. Now, if you are a black woman who is not married, do not take this as an indictment of yourself. Don't listen to the churches that are trying to arrange and force marriages because they exist. I just left one. Shame you because you're not married. When people have agendas, my grandmother was known for saying two things to me. And she was known for a whole lot more than those two things, but they're the things that stand out right now. Number one, misery loves company. But number two, consider the source. When people are trying to get you to do something, I will say again, I do not believe that black women need to divest in order to find a man. I don't know every single one of your stories. I don't know what your dating history is. I think it is foolhardy to lump us all into a group. Now, if any of the criticisms that go along with being Sapphire or Mammy or Jezebel sound familiar, they sound familiar because they've been coming off the lips of a lot of our own black men. And they're also the reason why brothers who swirl exclusively give for swirling. So I followed this female disc jockey at one point, and she was asking black men who date outside, which I think is a big mistake, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I've kind of already told you why, but I'm going to break it down a little bit more. So she asked him, why do y'all date? What are black women doing wrong? Now, by the time you get done with it, you have to understand that part of that is supernatural warfare too. Satan loves to have folks at enmity with each other. Okay? So I'm like, first of all, you make it sound, and so I responded, and I said, she asked, what are black women doing wrong? So of course, if you ask that question, the dusties, the black men who deserve the black men who deserve a big old coat of pledge, in other words, they dusty, are going to be more than happy to pour as much venom as they can out. And so I answered, and I said, and I'll tell you exactly what I said. I said, does it ever occur to you that the problem might not be us? Because the majority of black men are marrying black women. Number one. And I don't even need a study to tell me that. I just have to look with my own two good eyes and see that the majority of my uncles all married black women except for one. He was married to a black woman, and then he cohabitated with a white woman for a minute, and she was a good person. She wasn't a bad person at all, And then he kind of messed that up, and so he wound up going back to black women. But I think he was just a lover. He loved all the ladies, so it didn't really matter what their color was. And some of y'all know, y'all got that, all y'all got that uncle, that cousin, that every color of the rainbow. As long as she got a vagina, she in there with cousin or uncle Ray Ray or whoever. Okay. But and so that's that uncle. I have been, and there's more than one of them in my family. Okay. So the overwhelming majority of black men are marrying black women. That's number one. Okay, now we can dispute whether or not there's some colorism involved, but for right now, we're just going to say the majority are marrying black women. Out of the minority of men who have even dated white women, there's a minority that dates outside exclusively. And out of that minority, probably not even a big number of them that do so because they hate black women. So now you're giving the lowest common denominator. You want them folks to tell us what we're supposedly doing wrong. Does it ever occur to you that them feeling that way is their own hang-up and not your hang-up, and not something that you should strive to fix? Okay? Why do you need to fix anything when the majority of the men that are your color are marrying the women that are also your color? Now, as a black woman, does this mean do a deep dive and figure out why you're still alone? No, it does not. And please do not. This is not the time for you to feel wounded. This is not the time for you to feel broken. When the devil was asking me through Facebook and some of these other forums where people like to shame black women for being single, well, why do you think you're single? Because I've been under some fierce attacks. And so I said, because I haven't found the right person. Okay? And another part of it was, a denomination that was at war with me because they were trying to pass me around sexually. That's the only way I can, term that. Or trying to harm me sexually. And, and claiming that it was my payback for not wanting to marry who they wanted me to marry. So if you're going through all of that deception and everything, so that played a huge part too. And so that was, my saying. And of course, and sometimes I will put stuff out there just to see what manner of spirit I'm dealing with. And so I finally put it one time and they were like, that's a lie, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why do you have a problem with me saying what's true? You haven't found the right person yet. Okay, if you haven't found the right person yet, because if they're the right person, then you will marry them. If you perceive them to be the right one for you, then you'd be making wedding plans. You'd at least be going to the JP. And so the person got mad, and let me tell you the purpose of those type of posts. They are from the enemy. And what they're meant to do is make you feel broken, make you feel bad, make you feel like there's something wrong with you that you're not married. One of the things I did from my single youth, and I'm glad I did it, was I suspended all of this notion of being married by a certain age. Now, don't get me wrong. When I was younger than 25, I wanted to be married by 25 and then 2 kids by 30. It didn't work out that way. By the time I had, a boy and a girl, which that goal worked out. I wanted one of each and I got one of each. So after you get the family that you want, okay, minus a member because, there was no husband, I started, after a while, the older I got, the less hung up I was about when it was going to happen. And so when I get to people who try to put those hangups back in place, I'm like, okay, I really have been delivered, because I can remember when some of this would have been a hangup, and it's no longer a hangup. And I'm not saying I don't desire to get married, because I do. Okay, I still want to be married, and I still believe that I'm gonna be married to a good black man. Okay. Now, how come you can't just say good man? Because no other group is getting all the negative press that black men are getting, and none of the other groups are being, basically, how can I say it, negatively stereotyped to their own women. Black women are getting a lot of bad press. Black men are getting a lot of bad press about black women. Black women are getting a lot of bad press about black men. Can you see the enemy working? And that's not to demonize anybody who has married outside. This is not that kind of session. This is not to demonize interracial marriage. There's nothing wrong with being married to somebody who isn't your ethnicity. That's not where I'm going. Where I have a problem is many times cults, and cults exist in the black community as well, love interracial marriage, and they love it for the wrong reasons. They like it because it helps their image. Okay? If you want to have an image of all embracing, we embrace all, we love all are welcome, then, throw a few interracial couples, adopt a few kids that are not your ethnicity, and you are in there. Anyway, so I'm coming to the end of this podcast. So this will be I think I see this discussion ending with the fourth broadcast, but we will see. Okay, I tend to like I said, I always try to have an outline and be organized, but I'm also open to the Spirit's leading. So when I feel like I've exhausted a topic, then and I don't think I've quite exhausted it with this podcast. Maybe with the next one we'll see. So you guys have a good day. I love you. This is the sound of me blowing a kiss to you. You guys have a good one. Enjoy your Tuesday. And I will see you with the next podcast. Hello, you have reached the message line for Adam's Rib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.